The music was too loud for real conversations. That was always the case at family gatherings, noise filling the gaps where sincerity might otherwise have to exist. Laughter drifting from corners. Glasses clinking. Compliments traded like currency. I stood near the drinks table, tracing the condensation on my glass, half listening to a conversation about real estate prices I had no interest in. These events had a familiar structure. My brother at the center. My parents orbiting proudly. Me somewhere in the background, present, acknowledged, but rarely engaged with in any meaningful way. It wasn't hostility, it was classification. Families, like companies, tend to assign roles early and rarely revisit them. My brother had always been the visible success. The charismatic one, the one whose achievements were easily narrated at social events. I had become something vaguer over time. Doing well, depending on who asked, busy with work. Some corporate thing. Descriptions that sounded polite but curiously empty. I had learned not to correct them, not out of insecurity but practicality. Most people weren't actually asking. Across the room, my brother was mid-story, a semicircle of relatives leaning toward him. His voice rose easily above the music, animated, confident. And honestly, he said, lifting his drink slightly, every family has one. A few people laughed already, sensing a punchline approaching. He tilted his head in my direction. There's always a loser. The laughter sharpened, then he smiled, that effortless, charming smile he'd spent decades refining. In our case, he said, gesturing loosely toward me, she's standing right there. The sound that followed wasn't explosive. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of laughter people produce when they believe they're participating in harmless social theater. I noticed my mother smiling. Not proudly, not apologetically, just accommodatingly, as if indulging a joke that required no intervention. Something inside me went very still, not hurt, not shock. Just a strange clarity, like stepping slightly outside the moment rather than reacting within it. I took a sip of my drink. No one was actually looking at me. Which, ironically, made the entire thing feel even more visible, because humiliation in families rarely arrives through confrontation. It arrives through consensus. What made the evening different wasn't my brother's remark. It was who happened to be standing nearby. Mr. Khanna had been speaking with my father for the past 10 minutes. A large client of my brother's company. Someone whose presence had triggered unusual attentiveness from everyone. Important guests carry a distinct gravitational pull. People straighten unconsciously around them. Voices soften, postures adjust. I had met him only twice before, both times briefly, both times professionally. He turned slightly as the laughter rippled through the room. "Loser," he repeated. The word cut through the ambient noise more effectively than my brother's speech ever had. It wasn't loud. But it was curious. The music seemed absurdly irrelevant for a moment. My brother laughed again, sensing an opportunity to extend the performance. "Oh, family joke," he said easily. "You know how it is." Mr. Khanna looked at him for a beat longer than social comfort typically allows. Then he glanced at me. Really glanced. Recognition moved across his face, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just the quiet alignment of memory with reality. "Funny," he said. The room had begun to quiet in that subtle, instinctive way groups do when something unscripted is happening. Because tone had shifted, conversation had shifted. Reality was adjusting. Because, he continued calmly, she's the director who owns your company. Silence doesn't descend like it does in films. It fractures. Glasses pause mid-air. Smiles freeze half-formed. Bodies remain in place while the social structure reorganizes itself. My brother didn't laugh this time. He blinked. A small, almost imperceptible hesitation. My mother's smile disappeared first. Not dramatically. Just withdrew. My father turned toward me with an expression I had never quite seen before. Not pride, not anger. Disorientation. Because information has a peculiar way of destabilizing long-held narratives. My brother cleared his throat. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said, voice tighter now. Mr. Khanna's expression remained neutral. There isn't. No theatrics, no triumph, just fact. And facts, unlike family dynamics, don't bend to comfort. 2. I hadn't planned for the moment. That part is important. There was no secret scheme. No dramatic reveal prepared in advance. No intention to publicly embarrass anyone. The acquisition had happened months earlier, quietly, procedurally, through a series of meetings, negotiations, and documents that carried none of the emotional weight now flooding the room. Business decisions rarely resemble personal vendettas. They are dry, structured, unromantic. I had simply never considered my family's assumptions relevant to those processes. Across the room, I watched understanding ripple unevenly through the guests. Some confused, some suddenly fascinated, some carefully avoiding eye contact with everyone. My brother stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Which, in a way, he was. Not because I had changed, but because his definition of me had collapsed. You what? He asked finally. Dialogue felt unnecessary, but absence would have felt evasive. It wasn't personal, I said. And that, strangely, was the part that seemed to unsettle him most. Because conflict is easier to process than indifference. Whew. The party did not recover. Conversations resumed eventually, but they carried an altered texture, quieter, cautious, subtly strained. Labels, once spoken aloud, rarely survive contradiction. My mother approached me later, her voice softer than usual. You could have told us? I considered the statement, not defensively, just honestly. You never really asked. She didn't respond, not because she disagreed, but because some truths resist polite rebuttal. Nothing spectacular followed in the weeks after. No dramatic apologies. No emotional reconciliations. Just adjustments. My brother became noticeably more measured around me. Not warmer, not hostile, simply aware in a way he had never needed to be before. My parents' tone shifted too. Respect didn't arrive as affection. It arrived as caution, as recalibration, as the quiet discomfort of revised understanding. And oddly, that felt sufficient. Because dignity, I realized, doesn't always come from being celebrated. Sometimes it comes from no longer being misdefined.